They thought human warships were outdated. Then Earth revealed the new design. The great chamber of the Concorde Assembly floated at the center of the space station Halveth, a station so old that no living being remembered who built it. Delegates from 42 star systems sat in curved rows that rose toward the ceiling like the inside of a shell. Light came from soft blue strips along the floor, and the air smelled faintly of ozone from the translation devices that let every species understand every other species. Admiral Elena Cade of the Earth Fleet sat near the back of the human delegation, arms crossed, listening to a Threll ambassador speak about fleet readiness. The Threll were tall and thin, with pale gray skin and long fingers that moved constantly when they talked, as if they were counting something only they could see. Their leader, First Speaker Voss, stood at the podium now, addressing the whole assembly. "We must speak plainly," Voss said, his translated voice calm but firm. "The Vorn Dominion grows bolder every season. They have taken 3 border worlds in the last 2 years. Soon they will test the edges of Concorde space itself. We must know which fleets can truly stand and fight." A murmur passed through the chamber. Elena felt eyes turn toward the human section, the way they always did when someone mentioned fleet strength. She kept her face still. She had learned long ago that showing anger in this room only made things worse. Voss continued, and this time he looked directly at the human delegation. "With respect to our human friends, we must ask honestly. Your Atlas-class cruisers were designed nearly 30 years ago. They were adequate against pirates and small raiders. But the Dominion fields warships with triple the shield strength and twice the firepower. Can Earth truly contribute to the defense of this alliance, or will Earth need protection instead?" The words landed hard, even through the flat tone of the translator. Several delegates from other species nodded in agreement. A Threll admiral near the front, a heavy-set officer named Karth, added his own comment without waiting to be called on. "No offense meant, Admiral Cade," Karth said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "But your ships still use projectile point defense and iron hull framing. We saw your fleet parade last year. It looked like a museum exhibit." Soft laughter rippled through parts of the chamber. Elena did not laugh. She stood slowly, smoothing her uniform jacket, and walked to the small podium reserved for delegation responses. "Admiral Karth is right about one thing," she said. "Our Atlas-class ships are 30 years old. He is wrong about everything else." She paused, letting the room settle. "Earth has never lost a system to raiders, pirates, or hostile powers since we joined this alliance. Not one. Our ships may look old to you. They have never failed us." "Looking old and being outdated are different things," Karth said. "The Dominion will not care how many raiders you turned away. They field capital ships that can crack a planet's crust from orbit. Can your Atlas cruisers survive that?" Elena did not answer right away. The honest answer was that she did not know for certain, and she was not going to lie in front of 42 delegations. Instead, she said, "Earth takes every threat to this alliance seriously. We always have. If the Dominion pushes further, Earth will respond as we always have, together with our allies." It was a careful answer, the kind diplomats gave when they wanted to say nothing, while still saying something. Voss studied her for a long moment, then nodded slightly and moved the assembly to its next topic, a dispute over mining rights in a system called Baron's Drift. Elena sat back down, and beside her, Ambassador Tom Reyes leaned over. "That went about as well as it could have," Tom whispered. "They're not wrong to worry," Elena said quietly. "The Dominion isn't like the raiders we've dealt with before. I saw the reports from the Kesh colony attack. Their new capital ships tore through a Threll defense fleet in 11 minutes. 11 minutes, Tom. That's not a fight. That's a demonstration." Tom's jaw tightened. Does the assembly know how bad it really was? Some of it, not all of it. Voss is trying to get every species to commit real forces before the Dominion tests the border again. He's not wrong to push. He's just pushing us because we're the easiest target in the room. After the session ended, Elena walked the long observation corridor that ringed the outer hull of Halveth Station. Through the wide viewports, she could see ships of a dozen different designs drifting in the docking lanes outside. Long, sleek Threll cruisers with curved wings, blocky Ren trade haulers, a scattering of smaller diplomatic shuttles. Somewhere among them, 3 human Atlas-class cruisers sat docked at Earth's assigned berth, their gray hulls looking plain and heavy, compared to the elegant alien designs around them. She stopped at the viewport and looked at her own ships for a long moment. They had served Earth well. She had commanded one of them, the Atlas cruiser Endurance, during the pirate wars 15 years earlier, when raiders from the outer belts had tried to cut off human shipping lanes. The Endurance had taken heavy damage in that fight and still brought every crew member home. Elena trusted these ships with her life. But Karth's words stayed with her. Looking old and being outdated are different things. A soft chime sounded on her wrist communicator. She lifted it and saw the message was flagged priority, coded from Earth Fleet Command back on Earth itself, nearly 40 light-years away through the relay network. Admiral Cade, report to secure channel immediately. Authorization Coral 7. Elena's stomach tightened. Coral 7 was a code she had only seen used twice before in her entire career, both times for matters the fleet did not want traveling through normal channels. She walked quickly to the human delegation's private communication room, sealed the door behind her, and activated the secure terminal. The face that appeared on the screen was Fleet Commander Yusuf Adeyemi, the highest-ranking officer in the entire Earth fleet, a broad-shouldered man with graying hair and tired eyes. He did not waste time with greetings. Elena, I need you to listen carefully, and I need you to keep what I'm about to tell you inside this room. Understood, sir. 3 years ago, after we got the first real intelligence reports on Dominion capital ship capability, Fleet Command authorized a classified shipbuilding program. Most of the officers in this fleet, including most of your fellow admirals, don't know it exists. Even the Concord Assembly doesn't know it exists. Elena leaned forward. Sir? We've been building a new warship class, not an upgrade to the Atlas. A completely new design, built from the ground up around lessons we learned from watching the Dominion fight, and lessons we learned from our own history, that most of the galaxy has forgotten. We call it the Valiant class. Why wasn't Fleet Command informed? Elena asked, though a part of her already understood. Leaks happened. Politics happened. If word got out too early, the Dominion might change tactics. Or worse, the Concord Assembly might demand access to technology Earth was not ready to share. Because we needed time to build it right, not fast, Adeyemi said. And because until yesterday, we weren't sure it would work at all. And yesterday? Adeyemi's expression shifted, something close to grim satisfaction. Yesterday, we ran the first live-fire trial against a decommissioned Dominion hulk we captured during the Kesh colony recovery effort. The Valiant prototype did not just win the engagement, Elena. It ended it in under 2 minutes, and it barely used a third of its available power. Elena sat back, stunned. She thought of Karth's mocking words in the assembly chamber only hours earlier. Museum exhibit. Sir, how many ships do we have ready? 1 prototype, fully operational, currently undergoing final crew training at the Jupiter shipyards. 4 more hulls in advanced construction, roughly 2 months from completion. The assembly cannot know about this yet. Not until we're certain the design holds up under real combat conditions, not just controlled trials. Then why tell me now? Adeyemi's face grew serious. Because our intelligence network just confirmed something troubling. The Dominion is massing a fleet near the border colony of Aldrin's Reach. Human colony, Elena. 8,000 civilians, mostly farmers and mining families. If the Dominion moves on it, and our best estimate says they will within the week, Aldrin's Reach will fall unless someone stops them. Elena felt the weight of it settle over her. The assembly won't authorize a full fleet response in time. Not through the usual channels. They'll debate it for days. I know, Adeyemi said, which is why I'm not asking the assembly. I'm ordering the Valiant prototype and a small escort of Atlas-class cruisers under your command to Aldrin's Reach. You leave in 6 hours. Elena's pulse quickened, part fear, and part something that felt almost like hope. Sir, if this goes wrong, if the new design fails in the field, then we lose a colony, and a prototype, and the whole galaxy will say humans really were outdated. Adeyemi finished for her. But if it works, Elena, if it works, they will never look at an Earth warship the same way again. He paused, studying her through the screen. I'm giving you command of this task force because you've earned it, and because I trust your judgment more than anyone else in this fleet. The Valiant's captain, Commander Yuki Tanaka, will brief you fully once you reach the Jupiter shipyards. Are you ready for this, Admiral? Elena thought of Karth's smug expression in the assembly chamber. She thought of the Endurance, old and faithful, carrying her crew home through fire 15 years ago. She thought of 8,000 civilians on a farming colony who had no idea their fate might already be sealed. "Yes, sir," she said. "I'm ready." "Good. Fleet command out." The screen went dark. Elena sat alone in the small sealed room for a long moment, the hum of the station's systems the only sound around her. Then she stood, straightened her jacket, and walked out to begin the 6 hours that would decide whether Earth's oldest reputation, faithful but outdated, was about to change forever. Outside the viewport, the 3 Atlas-class cruisers still sat docked in their berth, gray and heavy and unassuming. Elena looked at them one more time as she passed. Soon they would fly beside something the galaxy had never seen. She wondered, walking quickly now toward the shuttle bay, whether the old ships would even recognize their newest sister when they saw her for the first time. 3 hours later, Elena's shuttle broke away from Halveth Station and began the long journey toward the Jupiter shipyards. Behind her, the assembly continued its slow debates, unaware that somewhere in the dark between the stars, Earth's answer to their doubts was already waking up. At the Jupiter shipyards, deep in the shadow of the great gas giant, technicians in heavy suits moved across the hull of a warship unlike anything humanity had built before. Its frame was sleeker than the blocky Atlas cruisers, yet somehow it looked heavier, more solid, as if it had been carved from a single piece of dark metal rather than assembled from separate plates. Along its spine ran a series of glowing lines, pale blue, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. Commander Yuki Tanaka stood on the observation platform above the dry dock, watching her ship for what felt like the 100th time, and still not growing tired of the sight. She was young for a commander, only 34, but she had spent the last 3 years living and breathing every detail of the Valiant's construction. She knew this ship better than she knew her own apartment back on Earth. Her second officer, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Webb, approached from behind, a datapad in hand. "Admiral Cade's shuttle just entered the docking approach, ma'am. She'll be aboard within the hour." Yuki nodded, still watching the ship. "Is the crew ready, Marcus?" "As ready as 3 months of simulations can make them. Nobody's fired her guns at a living enemy yet. Everything we know is from trials against a dead Hulk. That Hulk gave us good data." "A Hulk doesn't shoot back," Marcus said quietly. Yuki turned to look at him, and for a moment, the confidence in her expression cracked, just slightly, showing the same doubt that lived in everyone connected to this project. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. We'll find out soon enough whether the difference matters." Below them, the great ship rested in its cradle, silent and waiting, its blue lines pulsing steadily in the dark. In 6 hours, it would leave the shipyard for the first time, not for another test, not for another trial, but for a real battle against a real enemy, to defend a colony that did not yet know how close it stood to disaster. The name painted along its hull, freshly finished only days earlier, read simply, Valiant. Far away, at the edge of Concord space, Dominion warships gathered in the darkness near Aldrin's Reach, their commanders confident that no human fleet built from old iron and old ideas could possibly stand in their way. They had studied Earth's ships, they had watched the parades, read the reports, listened to the mocking words of delegates like Karth, echoed through intercepted Concord transmissions. They believed, as most of the galaxy believed, that humanity's warships belonged in a museum. They were about to learn how wrong that belief truly was. They thought human warships were outdated. Then Earth revealed the new design. Aldrin's Reach was a quiet world, the kind of place most star charts barely bothered to label. Golden wheat fields stretched across its northern continent, tended by families who had left Earth 2 generations earlier looking for open land and open sky. Its capital, a modest town called New Harvest, had a population of just under 8,000 people, a handful of schools, 1 hospital, and a small orbital defense platform that had never once fired its weapons in anger. Governor Priya Nandi stood in the observation room of that defense platform now, watching the sensor display with growing dread. 3 days earlier, long-range scans had picked up unusual activity near the edge of the system, distant contacts moving in formation, too organized to be debris, too quiet to be anything friendly. Yesterday, those contacts had resolved into shapes the sensor operators recognized from Concord threat briefings, Dominion warships, 11 of them, including 2 vessels large enough to be capital ships. "They're not moving," said Lieutenant Oscar Bram, the platform's young sensor officer. Just holding position at the edge of the system, watching us. Waiting for something, Priya said quietly. Or someone, Oscar replied. Priya had sent 3 separate distress calls to Concord Command over the last 2 days. The first 2 had received only automated acknowledgement. The third had finally produced a response, a short, careful message from Fleet Command back on Earth, promising help was on the way, without specifying what kind of help or how much of it. She had shared that message with the town council, and most of them had not found it very comforting. Governor, Oscar said suddenly, straightening in his chair. New contacts. Coming in from the direction of Earth space. Reading 4 vessels. Wait, 5. Priya moved to stand behind him, watching the display. 5 ships, moving fast, cutting a clean path toward Aldrin's Reach. As they drew closer, the platform's identification system began sorting through known ship profiles. 4 Atlas-class cruisers, Oscar reported, relief plain in his voice. Confirmed Earth fleet transponders. He paused, frowning at his own screen. 5th ship isn't matching anything in our database, Governor. It's reading Earth fleet transponder codes, but the hull profile doesn't match any registered class. Priya leaned closer, studying the unfamiliar shape on the sensor display. Even reduced to a rough sensor silhouette, something about it looked different from the boxy Atlas cruisers she had seen in defense drills over the years. Sleeker, heavier somehow, despite the sleekness. Can you get a visual? Working on it, but they're still 4 hours out at current speed. 4 hours, Priya thought, glancing back toward the silent Dominion fleet sitting at the edge of the system. 4 hours to find out whether Earth had sent enough ships to matter, or simply enough ships to die alongside Aldrin's Reach when the Dominion finally decided to stop waiting. Aboard the Valiant, Admiral Elena Cade stood on the bridge, watching the same distance close from the opposite direction. The ship's bridge felt different from any Atlas cruiser she had commanded. Quieter. The lighting was softer, easier on the eyes during long watches. The main display curved around the forward wall rather than sitting as a flat screen, giving a sense of looking directly out into space rather than at a picture of it. Commander Yuki Tanaka stood at the tactical station, running final diagnostics as the ship's systems hummed steadily around them. All primary systems reading green, Admiral. Shield capacitors at 100%. Weapon arrays charged and ready. Talk me through the numbers again, Elena said. I want to understand exactly what we're bringing into this fight. Yuki nodded, pulling up a tactical display. The Valiant's shields use a layered design, 3 separate harmonic frequencies instead of 1. Dominion weapons are tuned to break through single-frequency shields fast. That's how they cracked the Threll defense fleet at Kesh Colony so quickly. Against a 3-layer shield, their weapons have to adapt mid-battle, and that takes time we don't think they have built into their combat doctrine. And the weapons. Our main batteries use a new particle acceleration method the engineers have been calling stride cannons. Instead of one continuous beam, they fire in rapid pulses that hit almost simultaneously, but from slightly different angles, which makes them much harder for point defense systems to intercept. In the live-fire trial against the captured Hulk, we punched through Dominion-grade armor in under 4 seconds per hit. Elena studied the numbers, then looked up at the forward display, where Aldrin's Reach was still just a small blue dot among the stars. And if the Dominion fleet doesn't fight like the Hulk did, if they adapt faster than we expect. Yuki's expression grew serious. Then we'll find out how good this ship really is, Admiral. That's the honest answer. Elena nodded slowly. It was the answer she had expected, and somehow it steadied her more than false confidence would have. She turned to her communications officer. Get me a channel to the Atlas cruisers. A moment later, the face of Captain Diego Alvarez, commanding the lead Atlas cruiser Resolute, appeared on a side display. He looked tired, but focused, a man who had spent 20 years flying ships the galaxy called outdated, and had never once doubted them. Admiral, Diego said, good to have you leading this one. Though I'll admit, half my crew can't stop staring at our new friend. Get used to it, Diego. We're going to be flying beside her for a long time. Elena's tone turned businesslike. Here's how we'll play this. The Atlas cruisers hold formation at the edge of the defense platform's engagement range, protecting the colony and the platform directly. The Valiant will move forward and make contact with the Dominion fleet first. Diego's eyebrows rose slightly. Alone, Admiral? Not entirely alone, but I want the Dominion commander focused on the new ship, not spreading his attention across all 5 of us. If this design works the way Fleet Command believes it does, the Valiant can handle their attention. If it doesn't, Elena paused. If it doesn't, I want the rest of you far enough back to protect the colony and get every civilian evacuation shuttle off that platform. Understood, Admiral, Diego said, though his voice carried clear reluctance. For what it's worth, I hope that ship is everything they promised. So do I, Diego, so do I. The channel closed, and Elena turned back to the forward display, watching the small blue dot of Aldrin's Reach grow slightly larger with each passing minute. Beside her, Yuki spoke quietly. Admiral, may I ask something? Go ahead. Why lead with the Valiant alone? We could keep formation together, hit them with everything at once. Elena considered the question for a moment before answering. Because if this ship is going to change how the galaxy sees us, they need to see it clearly. One ship, standing against their fleet, and winning, not 5 ships working together to barely survive. If we're going to prove something today, Commander, we should prove it in a way nobody can argue with afterward. Yuki was quiet for a moment, then nodded. Understood, Admiral. 3 hours later, the Dominion fleet finally moved. Aboard the lead Dominion capital ship, a massive vessel called the Ash Crown, Fleet Commander Draven Voss Karn watched the approaching human ships with something between curiosity and contempt. He had studied Earth's fleet capabilities extensively before accepting this assignment. Old ships, slow to adapt, brave, but limited. The Concord Assembly's own delegates mocked them openly, and Draven had found no reason to disagree with that assessment. 4 vessels matching known Atlas-class profiles, his tactical officer reported. 1 unidentified vessel, larger than the others, moving ahead of the formation. A flagship, perhaps, Draven mused. Or a bluff. Humans are known for theatrical gestures. He studied the unfamiliar ship's silhouette on his display, noting its sleek lines with a flicker of genuine interest, quickly suppressed. Reduce the fleet to combat readiness. We will allow the unidentified vessel to approach within engagement range before responding. I want to see what Earth considers worth sending alone against 11 warships. And if it proves to be a threat, Commander? Draven's expression did not change. Then we will remove it, and continue with the colony as planned. 8,000 humans will make an excellent example for the rest of this alliance to consider, before they resist Dominion expansion further. The Ash Crown's weapon systems began charging, along with the 10 warships arrayed behind it. Their combined firepower more than enough, by every calculation Draven's officers had run, to destroy 100 ships like the one now approaching alone through the dark. Aboard the Valiant, Elena watched the Dominion fleet's weapon signatures begin to spike on her tactical display. They're charging weapons, Admiral, Yuki reported. Full fleet, all 11 vessels. Distance to engagement range? 90 seconds. Elena took a slow breath, feeling the whole ship humming quietly around her, alive and ready. She thought of Karth's mocking laughter in the assembly chamber. She thought of 8,000 civilians on a farming colony below, watching their sky and praying that whatever Earth had sent would be enough. She thought of the Endurance, faithful and old, and the Valiant, new and unproven, both carrying the same simple promise that had defined humanity's fleet since the very beginning. We do not run, and we do not lose the people counting on us. All hands, Elena said, her voice carrying clearly through the ship's intercom. This is Admiral Cade. In 60 seconds, we are going to show the galaxy something they've never seen before. Whatever happens next, I am proud to be standing with every one of you. On the bridge, Yuki met her eyes and gave a small, determined nod. 30 seconds to engagement range, the tactical officer reported. Elena turned to face the forward display, where 11 Dominion warships waited in the dark, utterly certain of their coming victory. Bring us in, she said quietly. Let's introduce ourselves. The Valiant surged forward, its engines flaring bright against the black, closing the final distance toward a fleet that had no idea it was about to witness the beginning of a new age for humanity's warships. Behind them, far enough back to remain safe, but close enough to watch everything unfold, the 4 Atlas cruisers held their formation, and on Aldrin's Reach, Governor Priya Nandi and Lieutenant Oscar Bram stared up at their sensor displays, holding their breath along with an entire colony, waiting to see whether Earth's promise of help would be enough to save them all. They thought human warships were outdated. Then Earth revealed the new design. The first Dominion volley lit up the darkness like a string of angry stars. 11 warships fired together, a coordinated barrage designed to overwhelm a single target before it could even register the threat. Aboard the Ash Crown, Fleet Commander Draven Voss Karn watched his tactical display with calm expectation, certain the human ship would vanish in the first exchange. It did not vanish. Shields holding, Yuki Tanaka reported from the Valiant's tactical station, her voice tight with focus but steady. 82% integrity across all 3 layers. No breach. On the bridge, Elena Cade felt the ship shudder slightly from the impact, but nothing more. She had braced for worse. The layered shield design engineers back on Earth had spent 3 years perfecting was holding exactly as promised, absorbing and redistributing the combined force of 11 warships opening salvo. Return fire, Elena ordered. Target the 2 lead capital ships. Let's see what our new guns can do. The Valiant's stride cannons fired, and for a moment, the entire bridge crew watched the forward display in something close to held breath. Pulses of concentrated energy lanced out from the ship's forward batteries, striking the Ash Crown's shields not as a single blow, but as a rapid series of impacts arriving from subtly different angles, faster than the massive ship's point defense grid could fully compensate. Aboard the Ash Crown, alarms began sounding across the bridge. Shield integrity dropping rapidly on the forward quarter. An officer called out, the disbelief evident in his voice. 60%, 50. The pattern is confusing our defense grid, Commander. It cannot lock a consistent intercept solution. Draven's calm expression finally cracked. One ship should not be doing this, he said, more to himself than to his crew. Increase power to forward shields. Concentrate all fire on the human vessel immediately. The Dominion fleet adjusted, redirecting its combined firepower toward the Valiant with renewed intensity. Explosions of light bloomed across the human ship's shields as the full weight of 11 warships bore down at once. Elena gripped the arm of her command chair as the Valiant shook harder this time, systems across the bridge flickering under the strain. Shield integrity at 55%, Yuki reported. They're adapting, Admiral, spreading their fire pattern to counter our layer rotation. Then we adapt faster, Elena said. Helm, execute evasive pattern Delta 3. Tanaka, redirect power from secondary systems to forward shields and weapons only. We fight through this. The Valiant twisted through space with a grace that seemed impossible for a warship its size, banking hard to present a narrower profile while its forward batteries continued firing in relentless, precise pulses. One Dominion escort vessel, caught in the path of a sustained volley, suffered a catastrophic shield collapse and took a direct hit along its hull. The explosion lit up the void, and for a brief moment, silence fell across both fleets as everyone processed what had just happened. A single human ship had just destroyed a Dominion warship in open combat. Aboard the Atlas cruiser Resolute, Captain Diego Alvarez stared at his display in stunned silence before a slow grin spread across his face. Did you see that? He said to his bridge crew. Did everyone just see that? His tactical officer, still watching the numbers scroll past, could only nod, equally speechless. Back at Aldrin's Reach, Governor Priya Nandi and Lieutenant Oscar Bram watched the same engagement unfold on the defense platform's sensor feed, the battle too distant for visual confirmation, but the tactical data painting a clear picture of what was happening. They destroyed one, Oscar said, disbelief in his voice. Governor, that new ship just destroyed a Dominion warship, and it's still fighting. Priya said nothing, watching the display with her hands clasped tightly together, not yet willing to believe the tide might actually be turning in their favor. Aboard the Ash Crown, Draven's composure had fully abandoned him. Recalculate targeting solutions, he snapped. Full spread pattern, all remaining vessels, immediately. Commander, we've lost the vessel Krith 9th entirely, and 3 others report significant shield damage, his tactical officer said. The human ship's fire pattern keeps shifting, faster than our systems can compensate. Then compensate faster, Draven said, though even he could hear the strain creeping into his own voice. He had commanded fleets for over 20 years. He had broken Threll defense lines, crushed pirate confederations, watched entire alliances surrender, rather than face the Dominion's overwhelming firepower. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for a single human warship absorbing his entire fleet's combined assault and continuing to fight back with increasing effectiveness. Aboard the Valiant, sweat beaded on Yuki Tanaka's forehead as she monitored the ship's systems, calling out adjustments with practiced precision, even as the numbers grew tighter with every passing second. Shield integrity holding at 40%, Admiral. We're taking damage, but we're inflicting more than we're receiving. Their formation is starting to fragment. They can't maintain a coordinated fire pattern against our shield rotation. Keep the pressure on the capital ships, Elena said. If we can force the Ash Crown to retreat or fall, the rest of their fleet may lose cohesion. Understood, Admiral. Redirecting forward batteries to concentrate on the Ash Crown's primary shield generator. We identified its location during the second exchange. The Valiant surged forward through the chaos of battle, weaving between incoming fire with a responsiveness that no Atlas-class cruiser could have matched. Elena watched the tactical display with fierce concentration, calling adjustments to the ship's course, as Dominion fire continued to rain down around them, closer now, more desperate, as the enemy commander clearly recognized the battle was slipping away from his expectations. A particularly heavy volley struck the Valiant's port side, and the ship shuddered violently. Sparks flew from a console near the back of the bridge, and a junior officer scrambled to contain a small electrical fire before it could spread. Shield integrity at 28% on the port quarter, Yuki called out, urgency finally breaking through her steady composure. Admiral, if they concentrate fire there again, we could see a breach. Elena's jaw tightened, but her voice remained level. Compensate with a hard turn. Bring our strongest shield facing toward their concentrated fire. Tanaka, I need that primary shield generator destroyed before they capitalize on this opening. 2 more pulses should do it, Admiral, if we can hold position long enough to complete the firing sequence. Then we hold, Elena said. Helm, hard turn, now. The Valiant banked sharply, engines flaring bright as it presented its stronger starboard shields toward the Dominion fleet's concentrated assault. The maneuver bought precious seconds, and the ship's forward batteries fired their final pulses of the sequence, striking directly into the weakened section of the Ash Crown's shields that Yuki's tactical team had identified. The result was immediate and dramatic. The Ash Crown's primary shield generator overloaded in a brilliant flash, visible even at this distance, and the massive capital ship's shields collapsed entirely across its forward section. Alarms screamed across the Dominion flagship's bridge. Shields down, Commander, an officer shouted. We are exposed. Draven stared at his tactical display, watching decades of assumed superiority crumble in the span of a single engagement. Fall back, he said finally, the words bitter in his mouth. All vessels, disengage and regroup at the fallback coordinates. We will not lose the Ash Crown to a single human vessel. Across the battlefield, the remaining Dominion warships began breaking formation, turning away from the fight, their earlier confidence replaced by something closer to alarm. Aboard the Valiant, a ragged cheer went up across the bridge as the enemy fleet's retreat became unmistakable, though Elena raised a hand for quiet, unwilling to celebrate before the threat had fully passed. Do not pursue, she ordered. Let them retreat. Our priority is the colony, not a chase that could scatter our formation and expose Aldrin's reach. Understood, Admiral, Yuki said, though the relief in her voice was unmistakable. Dominion fleet is withdrawing at high speed, heading back toward the system's edge. They've lost 2 vessels confirmed, 3 more show significant damage. Elena allowed herself a slow breath, feeling the tension of the last 20 minutes finally begin to ease from her shoulders. Status report, all systems. Shield integrity at 19%, and holding, no breaches sustained. Minor hull damage across the port section, 2 small fires contained. Casualties, none reported so far, though we're still completing a full check across all decks. Good work, Commander, Elena said, and she meant it with her whole heart. She looked at the forward display, where the retreating Dominion fleet grew smaller with each passing second, their overwhelming numerical advantage rendered meaningless by a single ship that fought smarter, adapted faster, and refused to break. Behind her, on the comm channel still open to the Atlas cruisers, Captain Diego Alvarez's voice came through, quiet, with something like awe. Admiral Cade, resolute here. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in my whole career. Neither have I, Diego, Elena admitted. Form up on the Valiant. Let's make sure that colony is secure, and let's get our people home. As the human task force began regrouping near Aldrin's reach, Word of the engagement was already traveling through Concord relay networks, carried first by automated sensor logs from the defense platform, then by excited transmissions from colonists who had watched the battle unfold in their own sky. Within hours, the story would reach the Concord assembly itself, and the smug confidence of delegates like Admiral Karth would face its first real test. But aboard the Valiant, none of that mattered yet. Elena Cade simply watched her crew work through the aftermath of their first true battle, proud beyond words of what they had accomplished, and quietly aware that the hardest fighting, and the hardest questions, might still lie ahead. They thought human warships were outdated. Then Earth revealed the new design. News of the battle at Aldrin's Reach spread through Concord space faster than anyone in Earth Fleet Command had expected. Within 2 days, every major news network across the Alliance carried some version of the story, though the details varied wildly depending on the source. Some reports claimed Earth had secretly acquired alien technology. Others insisted the Dominion fleet had simply been undermanned and poorly led. A few outlets, mostly small independent networks run by species with less reason to protect their own pride, reported the plain truth. A single new class of human warship had fought 11 Dominion vessels and forced a retreat, destroying 2 and damaging 3 more, without losing a single crew member. At the Concord Assembly on Halveth Station, the mood in the human delegation's private quarters was cautiously triumphant. Ambassador Tom Reyes stood by the viewport, watching a live feed of the assembly chamber, preparing for an emergency session, called at First Speaker Voss's own request. "They're scrambling," Tom said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "Voss requested this session personally. Word is half the assembly wants to know why Earth kept a warship program secret from the Alliance, and the other half wants to know if we'll build more of them for everyone else." Elena Cade, back at Halveth after handing temporary command at Aldrin's Reach to Captain Alvarez, sat at the small conference table, reviewing reports from Fleet Command. "Neither question has a simple answer," she said. "Fleet Command is still deciding how much to reveal about the Valiant program. Adeyemi wants to protect the technology until we understand exactly what we're dealing with regarding the Dominion. But hiding everything now, after what happened at Aldrin's Reach, might make things worse." "Karth's going to have a hard time explaining his museum exhibit comment," Tom said, unable to fully hide his grin. Elena allowed herself a small, tired smile. "I'm not interested in making anyone eat their words, Tom. I'm interested in making sure this doesn't become a bigger problem than the Dominion already is." Her wrist communicator chimed, another priority message from Fleet Command. She read it quickly, and her expression grew serious. "What is it?" Tom asked. "Intelligence reports the Dominion isn't backing down. If anything, the defeat at Aldrin's Reach seems to have provoked them. Long-range scans show a much larger fleet forming near their border, over 40 vessels, including what our analysts believe are 3 additional capital ships, beyond anything we've seen before." She looked up. "They're not testing the border anymore, Tom. They're planning to punch through it." "Where?" "Best estimate points to the Threll colony world of Senik Prime. It's the largest Concord settlement along that stretch of border, over 2 million people. If the Dominion takes it, they'll have a staging ground deep inside Concord territory." Tom's expression turned grim. "Does Voss know?" "Fleet Command is briefing the Assembly leadership within the hour. That's likely part of why this emergency session was called so quickly." Elena stood, gathering her tablet. "I need to speak with Adeyemi before that briefing happens. If the Dominion is truly massing for an assault on Senik Prime, 4 more Valiant-class ships won't be ready in time. We're going to need every ally we have, and they're going to need to trust what we're bringing to the fight." 3 hours later, the Concord Assembly Chamber was packed beyond its usual capacity. Delegates from every member species crowded into seats and standing along the walls, all attention fixed on the podium where First Speaker Voss stood alongside Fleet Commander Adeyemi, who had traveled from Earth specifically for this session, and Admiral Elena Cade beside him. Voss opened the session without his usual lengthy preamble. 3 days ago, a single human warship engaged an 11-vessel Dominion fleet at the colony of Aldrin's Reach. It destroyed 2 enemy warships, damaged 3 more, and forced a full retreat without losing a single member of its crew. He paused, letting the words settle across the chamber. "I have called this session because every delegation in this room deserves a full account of what happened, and because our alliance now faces a threat greater than any we have encountered since the Dominion first appeared at our borders. He gestured to Adeyemi, who stepped forward to address the assembly directly. 3 years ago, Adeyemi began, Earth Fleet Command initiated a classified warship development program in response to early intelligence suggesting the Dominion's technology had advanced beyond what our existing fleet could reliably counter. I understand many of you will have questions about why this program was kept secret from the Concord Assembly, and I intend to answer those questions honestly. A ripple of tension passed through the chamber. Admiral Karth, seated near the front, leaned forward with visible skepticism. We kept the program secret, Adeyemi continued, because we did not yet know if it would succeed, and because we understood the risk that incomplete or unproven information could create false confidence across this alliance at a critical moment. I recognize that decision may have been the wrong one. I stand before you now to correct it. Earth is prepared to share full technical specifications of the Valiant-class warship with every Concord member species, and to accelerate joint construction efforts using Earth shipyards and any allied shipyards capable of adapting the design. The chamber erupted into overlapping conversation, delegates turning to each other in surprise. Voss raised a hand for quiet, and slowly the noise subsided. This is a significant offer, Voss said. Admiral Karth, you had strong words for the human delegation only days ago. Do you have questions for Fleet Commander Adeyemi now? Karth stood slowly, his earlier confidence visibly shaken but not entirely gone. I acknowledge the human fleet performed better than my assessment suggested, he said stiffly. But one battle against one portion of the Dominion fleet does not prove the Valiant class can withstand a full-scale assault. Our intelligence, which I understand the human delegation now shares, indicates the Dominion is massing a much larger force near Senek Prime. 40 vessels, 3 of them capital ships beyond anything previously observed. Can 4 more prototype warships, however impressive in a smaller engagement, truly stand against such a force? Adeyemi did not flinch from the question. Honestly, Admiral Karth, I don't know. No single ship class, human or otherwise, can guarantee victory against 40 warships alone. That is precisely why Earth is bringing this information to the Assembly, rather than trying to handle the Dominion threat alone. We believe the Valiant class represents a significant advantage, but advantage is not the same as certainty. We need this alliance to stand together, combining every fleet, every strength, every ship we have, if we intend to protect Senek Prime, and every colony beyond it. Elena stepped forward to stand beside Adeyemi, addressing the Assembly directly for the first time. I commanded the Valiant during the engagement at Aldrin's Reach, she said. I can tell you honestly that it was not an easy fight. Our shields dropped to 19% before the Dominion fleet withdrew. If they had pressed the attack for even a few minutes longer, the outcome might have been very different. We did not win because our ship was invincible. We won because it was well designed, well built, and crewed by people willing to hold the line even when the numbers looked impossible. That combination, ship and crew together, is what this alliance needs to bring to Senek Prime, not just from Earth, from every one of us. A long silence followed her words, and then, slowly, delegates across the chamber began to nod, murmurs of agreement spreading through the rows. Voss studied Elena for a long moment, something like respect visible in his expression for the first time since she had known him. Admiral Cade speaks plainly, Voss said. I find I appreciate that quality more with each passing year. He turned to address the full assembly. I propose an emergency joint fleet action. Every member species capable of contributing warships will combine forces under a unified command structure, to be determined by this assembly within the next 6 hours, and will move to reinforce Senek Prime before the Dominion fleet arrives. Earth will share the Valiant technical specifications immediately with any shipyard capable of beginning adapted construction, though we all understand no new ships will be ready before this coming engagement. This will be a fight with the fleets we have, not the fleets we wish we had. The vote that followed was nearly unanimous, only a handful of smaller delegations abstaining due to limited fleet resources of their own. Within the hour, star systems across Concord space began receiving emergency mobilization orders, warships breaking away from routine patrols and diplomatic escorts to converge on a single destination. Back in the human delegation's private quarters after the session ended, Elena stood once more at the viewport, watching distant lights that represented ships from a dozen different species beginning to move through the void outside Halvith Station. "You did well in there," Adeyemi said, joining her at the window. "I told the truth," Elena said. "That's all. Sometimes that's the hardest thing to do in that chamber." Adeyemi was quiet for a moment. "The Valiant and its escort will need to rejoin the main fleet within 2 days. I'm sending the 4 remaining prototype hulls as well, even though they're not fully complete. Skeleton crews, minimal weapon loadouts on 2 of them. It's not ideal." "It's what we have," Elena said, echoing Voss's words. "Sir, who's taking command of the joint fleet?" Adeyemi met her eyes. "The Assembly is still debating that, but early consensus is leaning toward you, Elena. Aldrin's reach earned you more credibility in that chamber today than 3 years of diplomatic meetings ever could." Elena felt the weight of the responsibility settle over her, heavy and real. Senec Prime, 2 million lives, a fleet built from a dozen different species, with a dozen different ships, all needing to work as one, against an enemy that had already proven willing to bring overwhelming force against anyone in its path. "If they give me the command," she said quietly, "I won't waste it." "I know you won't," Adeyemi said. "Get some rest, Admiral. You're going to need it. The Dominion fleet is 3 days out from Senec Prime, and I have a feeling the fight waiting there is going to make Aldrin's reach look like a skirmish." Outside the viewport, more ships continued gathering in the dark, an alliance assembling itself in real time, drawn together not by treaty or tradition, but by the sudden, urgent understanding that survival required standing together. Elena watched them a moment longer, then turned and walked back toward her quarters, knowing that whatever rest she found in the next 2 days would be the last real rest before the largest battle of her career. They thought human warships were outdated. Then Earth revealed the new design. Senec Prime hung against the black like a pale blue jewel, its 2 moons catching the light of a distant yellow sun. On the surface, over 2 million Threll citizens went about their lives largely unaware of how close disaster stood at their doorstep, though evacuation shuttles had already begun quietly moving the youngest and oldest citizens toward deep shelter facilities as a precaution. Above the planet, in the growing dark of open space, the largest combined fleet the Concord Assembly had gathered in over a century assembled into formation. Admiral Elena Cade stood on the Valiant's bridge, looking out at ships from a dozen different worlds arranging themselves according to the battle plan she and her joint command staff had spent the last 2 days developing. Sleek Threll cruisers with their curved wings held the center formation. Blocky Wren battleships, slower but heavily armored, anchored the flanks. Smaller vessels from a half-dozen minor Concord species filled supporting roles, screening for fighters and providing additional sensor coverage. And at the heart of it all, the Valiant and its 4 sister ships, 2 of them still carrying skeleton crews and reduced weapon loads, formed the fleet's spearhead. "All fleet elements report ready, Admiral," Yuki Tanaka said from the tactical station. "Dominion fleet detected at extreme sensor range, holding course, estimated arrival in 18 minutes. Elena nodded, studying the tactical display that showed the true scale of what they faced. 43 Dominion warships, including 3 massive capital ships larger than the Ash Crown had been, moving in tight, disciplined formation towards Senec Prime. Against them stood 61 Concord vessels of wildly varying design and capability, unified only by 2 days of hurried coordination and the shared understanding that failure meant losing the largest colony in this sector of space. On a side channel, First Speaker Voss's face appeared, having insisted on remaining aboard the Threll flagship Sonaris rather than retreating to safety during the battle. "Admiral Cade, the full assembly stands behind this fleet's actions today. Whatever happens, know that you did not fight this battle alone." "Thank you, First Speaker," Elena said. "Let's make sure we're all still standing to hear that again afterward." Admiral Karth's face appeared on another channel, commanding the Threll cruiser squadron holding the center formation. His earlier arrogance had been replaced entirely by grim determination. "Admiral Cade, my squadron will hold the center as agreed. I have studied the Valiant's engagement data extensively. Your shield rotation tactics, we intend to adapt them across our own formation, as best we can on short notice." "Do what you can, Admiral Karth," Elena said. "And Karth, for what it's worth, I never held your earlier comments against you. You were speaking from the data you had at the time." Karth's expression flickered with something like genuine gratitude. That is more grace than I likely deserved, Admiral. I intend to earn better data today. The channel closed, and Elena turned back to the forward display, watching the minutes count down toward engagement. Beside her, Yuki spoke quietly. 18 minutes felt like a long time when we said it. It feels very short right now. It always does, Elena said. Status on the other Valiant-class ships? Defiant and Steadfast report full combat readiness. Courageous and Unbroken confirm reduced weapon loads but full shield capacity. Their captains understand the plan. The plan, developed over 2 exhausting days of joint command meetings, called for the 5 Valiant-class ships to form a mobile strike force, using their superior speed and shield technology to target and disable the Dominion's 3 capital ships before their firepower could break the rest of the Concorde fleet's formation. Meanwhile, the combined cruiser and battleship formations would engage the remaining Dominion escort vessels, using their numerical advantage and newly adapted shield tactics to grind down the enemy's smaller ships. It was, Elena knew, a plan built on hope as much as calculation. But it was the best plan. 61 ships from a dozen different species could build together in 2 days, and it would have to be enough. 10 minutes to engagement, Yuki reported. Elena activated the fleet-wide communication channel, her voice carrying to every ship in the combined formation, translated instantly into a dozen different languages for crews who had never fought alongside each other before today. This is Admiral Cade. In a few minutes, we're going to face an enemy that believes overwhelming force always wins. They believe old ships and unfamiliar alliances cannot stand together against them. I've had the honor of proving one part of that assumption wrong already, and today, all of us together are going to prove the rest of it wrong as well. Hold your formations, trust your fellow ships, even the ones flying designs you've never seen before. We are not fighting today as separate fleets from separate worlds. We are fighting as one alliance, and that is something the Dominion has never truly faced before. Cade out. The channel closed, and across 61 ships from a dozen worlds, crews who had spent their whole lives serving different flags under different stars, steadied themselves for the same fight, together. The Dominion fleet arrived exactly on schedule, 43 warships sweeping into formation at the edge of the Senek Prime system, with the same overwhelming confidence that had carried them through countless previous conquests. Aboard the lead capital ship, a vessel called the Dread Marshal, Grand Admiral Threxa Volkesh studied the assembled Concorde fleet with open disdain. They have gathered every scrap fleet in this sector, she observed to her staff. Old cruisers, converted trade vessels, and I count only 5 of the new human warships that caused such alarm at Aldrin's Reach. Interesting that they place such faith in so few hulls. Orders, Grand Admiral? Her tactical officer asked. Full engagement, all vessels. Target the human warships first, as instructed by Fleet Command's analysis of the Aldrin's Reach engagement. Eliminate the variable before it can repeat its earlier success. The remainder of this scattered alliance will fall easily once their prized new ships are destroyed. The Dominion fleet surged forward, and the largest battle the Concorde Assembly had fought in over a century began in earnest. The engagement unfolded across nearly 2 hours of brutal, chaotic combat. The 5 Valiant-class ships drove hard toward the Dominion capital ships exactly as planned, their layered shields and pulsing weapon fire causing exactly the kind of confusion and damage that had proven so effective at Aldrin's Reach. But 43 ships brought a complexity no single engagement could fully prepare for, and the battle quickly spread across a vast volume of space, individual squadrons fighting their own desperate contests within the larger storm. Elena watched her tactical display with fierce concentration as the Valiant pressed its attack against the Dread Marshal itself, exchanging devastating fire with the massive Dominion flagship, while Defiant and Steadfast worked to isolate and cripple a second capital ship on the fleet's northern flank. Courageous, one of the reduced weapon vessels, took heavy damage protecting a squadron of smaller Threll cruisers from a concentrated Dominion assault, its captain making the desperate choice to place his ship's superior shields between the enemy and his more vulnerable allies. Courageous reports critical shield failure, Yuki called out, tension straining her voice. They're falling back, but 2 Threll cruisers made it clear of the engagement because of that maneuver. Get them support, Elena ordered. Redirect Unbroken to cover their retreat. The battle raged on, losses mounting on both sides. A Wren battleship, ancient and heavily armored, took a direct hit from Dominion capital ship weapons and broke apart in a silent flash of light, its 900 crew members lost in an instant. Admiral Karth's squadron, adapting Elena's shield rotation tactics under real combat pressure for the first time, managed to destroy 2 Dominion escort vessels, while losing only 1 cruiser of their own, a trade that would have seemed impossible only days earlier. Aboard the Valiant, the fight against the Dread Marshal had become a brutal contest of endurance. Both ships had taken severe damage, shields flickering dangerously low on both sides, weapon systems firing at reduced capacity as damage accumulated across critical systems. Shield integrity at 11%, Yuki reported, her voice tight but controlled. Admiral, we cannot sustain another direct hit of that magnitude. Elena studied the tactical display, watching the Dread Marshal's own damage readouts, painstakingly gathered through 2 hours of sustained combat data. Their shields are lower than ours, Commander, 8%, maybe less. One more coordinated strike. We won't survive a full exchange to deliver it. Then we don't give them a full exchange. Elena's mind raced through the possibilities, drawing on every lesson learned, across 2 brutal engagements. Helm, hard burn directly toward their port side, minimum safe distance. Tanaka, concentrate everything remaining into a single sustained pulse the moment we're in optimal range. We're not trading blows anymore. We're ending this in 1 strike. Admiral, that maneuver will leave us completely exposed if it fails. It will work, Elena said, with a conviction she felt down to her bones. Do it. The Valiant surged forward on a desperate close-range attack run, engines burning at maximum output as it closed the distance toward the Dread Marshal's weakened flank. Dominion point defense systems scrambled to intercept, filling the space between the 2 ships with desperate fire, several strikes finding their mark, and rattling the Valiant's failing shields to their absolute limit. Shield integrity at 3%, Yuki called out, her voice barely steady. Admiral, we're in optimal range. Fire everything, Elena said. The Valiant's stride cannons unleashed a final, sustained pulse of concentrated energy directly into the Dread Marshal's weakened shields. And this time there was no absorption, no gradual weakening. The Dominion flagship's shields collapsed entirely, and the follow-through strike tore directly into its exposed hull, triggering a cascading failure through its primary power systems. Across the battlefield, both fleets watched as the massive capital ship's lights flickered and died, its engines going dark as it drifted, crippled and defenseless, out of the fight entirely. Aboard the Dread Marshal, Grand Admiral Threxa Volkesh stared at her failing systems in stunned disbelief, the same disbelief that had gripped Draven Voss Karn days earlier at Aldrin's Reach. Signal the fleet, she said finally, her voice hollow. All vessels, disengage and withdraw. We cannot continue this engagement without flagship coordination. Across the scattered battlefield, Dominion ships began breaking away from their individual engagements, the loss of their flagship and the accumulating damage across their formation, finally overwhelming their earlier confidence. What had begun as a confident assault against a hastily assembled alliance ended, nearly 2 hours later, in a full Dominion retreat, leaving behind 11 destroyed warships and a shattered assumption of easy victory. Aboard the Valiant, the bridge crew allowed themselves a moment of exhausted celebration as confirmation of the Dominion withdrawal spread across the fleet-wide channel. Elena sank back into her command chair, feeling the full weight of the last 2 hours finally catch up with her, relief and grief mixing together as damage reports began arriving from across the fleet, celebrating survival while mourning losses that could never be undone. 3 days later, in the Concord Assembly Chamber, First Speaker Voss stood before a full session, the mood entirely different from the skeptical debates of only a week earlier. Elena Cade stood beside Fleet Commander Adeyemi, both exhausted but steady, having traveled directly from Senek Prime to deliver a full account of the battle. The Concord Assembly owes a debt to every species who contributed ships and crews to the defense of Senek Prime, Voss said. We owe particular acknowledgement to Earth, whose new warship design and willingness to share that technology with this alliance proved decisive in a battle none of us could have won alone. He turned to Elena. Admiral Cade, this assembly would like to formally recognize your leadership, both at Aldrin's Reach and at Senek Prime, and to extend a standing invitation for Earth's continued partnership, in developing joint fleet capabilities going forward. Admiral Karth stood from his seat, and for the first time since Elena had known him, he offered a genuine, unguarded smile. Admiral Cade, I believe I owe you a more direct apology as well. I called your fleet a museum exhibit. I have rarely been more wrong about anything in my career, and I am grateful to have been proven wrong before it cost us everything. Elena inclined her head. Apology accepted, Admiral Karth, though I'd rather you remember today for what we built together than for what either of us said before we understood each other better. Later, after the session closed, Elena stood once more at the observation corridor's viewport, watching ships from a dozen worlds moving through the docking lanes outside, no longer strangers to each other after the shared trial of Senek Prime. Tom Reyes joined her, 2 cups of coffee in hand, offering one to her without a word. They're already drafting joint construction agreements, Tom said. 3 species have formally requested Valiant-class technical exchanges. Adeyemi says Fleet Command wants you overseeing the whole program. Elena accepted the coffee, watching the ships drift past the viewport. It's strange, she said. A week ago, they thought our warships were outdated. Now half the assembly wants to build ships just like ours. Funny how one good design and one very determined admiral can change an entire galaxy's mind, Tom said with a small smile. Elena allowed herself a rare, genuine laugh, tired but real. It wasn't just the ship, Tom. It was everyone who flew it, and everyone who stood beside it when it mattered most. She looked out at the gathered fleet, human and alien ships alike, no longer divided by old assumptions about who could and could not be trusted to stand and fight. That's the part I hope they remember, long after they've forgotten what our old ships used to look like. Outside the viewport, the Valiant sat docked in its berth, its hull scarred from battle, but its pale blue lines still pulsing steadily, patient and ready. A quiet promise that whatever the galaxy sent against them next, humanity, and the allies who now stood beside it, would be ready to meet it together.